identifying the flaw is the first step. Using slow motion capture or video assessments, we're able to identify the flaw. And then from there, we're able to work to provide that solution so that we can get out of pain. If you are standing and your anatomy is already out of whack, and then you go to start moving and you do that at a higher speed because you like to run or you play a sport, you have a significantly higher chance to injure yourself.
I'm Garrett Salpeter, and I believe that the most powerful and transformative way to help people recover from pain and injury, heal from trauma, and reach their highest levels of fitness and performance is to focus on the nervous system. In this podcast, we'll share knowledge from the frontiers of neuroscience and inspirational stories of how applying that knowledge has empowered people from all walks of life to heal, adapt, and grow.
Hello, NeuFit Nation, and welcome to the Undercurrent podcast. On this episode today, we're going to talk about movement analysis, motion capture, and making recommendations and custom programming for improving movement efficiency for health and performance. So it's a really fascinating topic. I'm excited to dive in. And our guest today is Jacob Salim, who is the co-founder of a company called G8way Max, spelled G, then the number 8 way. And you'll see why the number 8 is relevant there as we talk about the discussion. And he is, has a cool background because he's, of course, been involved in movement and as a strength coach and biomechanics coach for a long time, and also has developed this expertise in software and technology as he's gone about building this company. So I've gotten to meet him through a mutual friend and try out the system and had a very positive experience, which I'll share also as we go through the discussion here. But first of all, Jacob, welcome.
Thank you, Garrett. It's a privilege to be here. I'm thrilled because our mission aligns, helping people avoid pain, to take away those limits and just live a healthier life, a happier life. And so just a privilege. I'm humbled to be here. And I think it's going to be a great podcast.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And I agree. And to kick off the conversation, can you tell a little bit of your backstory and what inspired you to create something like this in the first place?
Totally. Well, growing up, I am a triplet. And so a lot of the things that we did growing up was the exact same. Performance training, the way we did certain activities, it was all the same. And so I really wanted a personalized approach to avoid injuries, to grow as an athlete. And I was a baseball player. I was chasing the dream of becoming a major league baseball player. And through ups and downs, I battled with injuries. And so just the ability to not have my dream be fulfilled because of injuries was something that drove me on this journey to help people move better. And I focused with athletes at first, and that kind of trickled into people that are 90 years old and they're just trying to enjoy a better life with their grandkids. And so not only did my life improve by improving my movement patterns, my neuromuscular behavior, and just the way I walked, the way I ran, the way I did everything on a movement level, it really did change my life. And I was able to take that to my family. Family are sometimes the hardest people to learn and to accept things. And just seeing my dad get out of back pain, it really touches my heart. And so I really just have loved the movement world. I've loved the things that you've done with helping people who are paralyzed just actually be able to walk again. And it's incredible. And so we started G8way Max about 7 years ago. We've been doing data analytics, assessing people's movement since 2011, whenever the iPhone could do slow motion technology. And so just assessing the way people run, the way their foot strikes the ground, the way they launch from the ground, and all the way into my world of baseball, helping people throw better, throw healthier. It's helped avoid injuries, and it's changed other people's lives, not just mine.
That's awesome. And one of the things that I want to emphasize there is, you mentioned essentially when you moved better, you felt better. Movement is, there's a lot of very accomplished neuroscientists who argue that the reason we have such big brains is because of movements, right? We have this breadth of different movements. The only animal who can walk and run and crawl and throw something and climb, right? This different breadth of movements that we have, and the complexity and the detail and all the processing power that it takes to monitor and control that. So it's such a profound influence on, yes, of course, the musculoskeletal system, but on our being as a whole too. So the quality of our movement, just to, really to double down on there, and also share part of the reason why I'm so excited for this work that you're doing, and the rest of this conversation here. So I think people, between my intro and what you shared there, they have a sense that we're talking about movement analysis, motion capture with a camera. Can you talk about, first of all, what motion capture is generally, in case anyone listening sort of needs a little framing up here of the category of technology, and then specifically about the gateway system, how it's different from traditional systems and what happens during a scan. So I know there's a lot there to unpack, but let's just, go through all that.
Totally, Garrett. So Gateway essentially will capture a video or pictures through the camera, and we're looking at the way the anatomy is present in walking behavior on the camera, or taking video of them running and analyzing the way the foot strikes the ground, the way the spinal engine is working. And so really sometimes people don't know what they need to work on unless they have a high-tech assistant, a physician, a biomechanist, someone like yourself, tell them what they need to work on. And so identifying the flaw is the first step. And so using slow motion capture or video assessments, we're able to identify the flaw. And then from there, we're able to work to provide that solution so that we can get out of pain. Your knee is hurting. All right. So why is your knee hurting? Let's watch you walk. Let's look at your structure, your anatomy, your mobility, some movements, and then we'll be able to assess why your knee is hurting. And then you'll have a program that's going to help fix your knee, but also the area too as well, because it might not just be the knee that's causing the problem. It could be your foot. It could be your hip. And so your program will be created at G8way Max based on your assessment. And that's as simple as I could just relay what it is of motion capture. So we do that all through the phone. You can do it anywhere. And you just simply open your phone in our app, take a picture, do your movement assessment, and instantly, after about 20 seconds, it'll then produce an assessment report and tell you, this is why I have pain. This is an area that if I don't fix this when I get older, it's going to start nagging me. And then, boom, after that, then we go into the solution, and you'll just do that on a training plan. So that's kind of G8way Max 2 as well. Our system is to assess first, because if we're not assessing, then we're just guessing. And so we need to assess first, figure out the problem, and then from there, then we'll provide the solution. And it's just pretty simple that way.
And I really enjoyed it, in part because of my experience going through your assessment, in part because back when I was in my PhD neuroscience program focused on motor control, I was in a biomechanics laboratory where they had, perhaps a dozen, I don't know the exact number, but cameras around the room. And then we had these markers on where it used to be how it was done, with these markers that you would stick on to the body. And then the system would figure out where those markers were, which one was correlated to the acromion process of the shoulder, and which one is on the greater trochanter of the femur, and which one is on the middle of the sternum. And it would measure your joint angles based on that. And it's fascinating to see now how far the technology has come in the last 10 plus years, where you can do it on your camera and it will be able to essentially measure joint angles and tell you what's working in an anatomically and biomechanically efficient way and what isn't. Can you talk, though, for a moment on that, just in a little more detail on what is it actually doing in the software? What, for instance, bony landmarks is it identifying? What joint angles is it looking at? Can you talk a little bit more in detail about what it's actually doing under the hood to analyze movement?
Totally. So like you said, technology has just up-leveled every year. And within the last decade, we were able to just create a software that you just take your phone out, and without having the different landmarks on your body with a marker or a sticker to be able to identify those points, we're able just to pull out our phone and automatically be able to tell where your shoulders are, where those joints are. And so it's assessing, do you have one leg longer than the other? That's what a lot of people would like to say is like, my one leg's longer than the other, I need to go to the chiropractor. Well, your hips are out of alignment. So we're assessing that. We're assessing whether your shoulders are in alignment. Do you have scapular winging or like a kyphotic posture? Is your neck in a good place? Do you have poor neck alignment? Are you at risk for an injury because your hips are out of alignment? And so the greater trochanter you mentioned, we've seen tons of data that majority of the people who are above the age of 12, and it's like huge difference for the people who are like 80, 60, 50, their hips have like pushed forward, thrusted forward out of alignment by about 3 to 7 inches. And they wonder why they like don't have low back pain.
That's in the sagittal plane. If you're looking at someone from the side, instead of the pelvis being, directly over the malleolus of the right. foot and ankle, you're talking about looking from the side, the pelvis being shifted forward in the sagittal plane, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. And that movement or that assessment point right there of where the joints are structured is just assessed solely at first in a standing behavior. And when we stand in a poor way, what do you think happens when you start running or doing something a little bit more athletic? And so the way I will relay this to people is, what do you think is more athletic or a more intensive movement? Running and making a cut on a football field, jogging, or standing in line at Chipotle? And everyone always says it's the movement piece. And the thing is if you are standing and your anatomy is already out of whack, and then you go to start moving and you do that at a higher speed because you like to run or you play a sport, you have a significantly higher chance to injure yourself. So one of the first things we do is just assess standing posture, the behavior of how your bones rest. And we're looking at those things I mentioned. Some more are feet alignment. So like the relationship between your feet, the shins, and the areas all in your lower extremities. We're looking at toe splay. So are your toes crammed together? We're looking at mobility things. So are you able to get full access within your hamstrings or your posterior chain? Are you able to get into like a deep squat, or are your hips and ankles limiting you there? We're looking at,
and just
also,
you mentioned full access in the posterior chain. So that would be fully lengthening in, forward bend type movement. Is that what you're talking about there?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And as a athlete, if you don't have access to your full body and your muscles are constrained, then you're not going to be able to be as explosive as you would want to be. And sometimes as an athlete, most of the time, you have to be the best that you can be, especially to move up levels. And if you have a limit there, you're not going to be able to jump as high or run as fast. And so, yeah, the forward bend, we're assessing that, the deep squat, and then those are some areas. And then moving forward too with our movement assessments, we'll assess when you land and you strike the ground, what did the Achilles do? Is the Achilles in a strong shape, or did the Achilles like the inner malleolus, did it collapse down and into the ground significantly? Are you going to be like a product of flat feet? Are you using your spinal engine when you run? Are you landing with your center of mass going over your foot? Or are you like not doing those things? And so those are a few of the things that we assess in a video. I'm a technician, and so I just to go into the technology a little bit because that's what you asked. In a video, it's assessing frame by frame by frame by frame in a video, and it's looking at in like a 90-second video. It's looking at probably 2,000 frames or however many it is, and each single frame, which is like a picture within a video, it's assessing 200 different like angles, like where your muscles are, like the shapes of your body and your anatomy. Did you land with a strong foot? Did your spinal engine work the right way, your hip engine? And so it's assessing all of those things and then giving you that report so that you know, okay, I got to work on this. I got to get out of back pain, and the reason why I have back pain is this. And so that's our video assessment. And then we also have one where it's just like looking at your mobility, your standing alignment, and posture. So 2 assessments is what G8way Max has.
And then in terms of how it works, so does the software look in the camera and does it do sort of what I described from the biomechanics lab with the marker days? Does it identify, okay, here's the calcaneus, here's the, patella or the fibular head, and here, does it identify bony landmarks and do joint angles and angles in between them, or how does it what data does it create and then analyze in order to do that? Is it that joint angles change in angular? Is it the speed at which they're changing? Is it I don't know. I mean, obviously we're not looking at levels of code here, but I think it's so cool how the system can do that. And not being a software guy myself, I just find it fascinating.
Yeah. And this is why I like this call, especially because you have the passion and you see it from that level too, even though you're not doing as much with technology like I am. But it totally does. It's looking at those landmarks, and it's looking at those landmarks in space, how they're moving. And so that's why I mentioned the slow motion technology is we got to really look at the slow motion of how they're moving and assessing those angles. So like the shoulders, your shoulders are out of alignment, like horizontally by like 3 degrees, which is a lot. Or like if it's more, I've seen some when they're squatting and it's like 7 degrees. And imagine putting a barbell on your back and you're just like, you got 7-degree tilt with your shoulders. You're going to be creating like a one side dominant muscle building structure within your body. If you have shoulders that are just like tilted and you just with no weight, we're assessing that with no weight. And imagine putting a heavy barbell on your back and you already have misalignments when you're no weight squatting and you put a barbell on your back, you're going to just start to build one side significantly. And so, yeah, it's just like how when you were in the lab with the markers, we just are able to assess through the phone without the markers, just because of all the data that we've created with it. The tool and the technology in the world is just up leveled in the AI race and everything. And so we've just been really able to create a great product and do that in a fast way for the consumer and just be like really user friendly.
Awesome. It is user friendly. That is one of the top few elements of my experience that really stayed with me, and part of why I thought this was worth sharing with NeuFit Nation here. So, 2 things that you mentioned along the way that's analyzing. I think everything you talked about, of course, is important, and there's a reason you chose these. You chose the alignment of the feet, the ability to access a deep squat, the ability to access the posterior chain, right? You're choosing these things because they're the fundamental pieces of quality human movement. And excuse me. And you also mentioned hip engine and spinal engine. I think those are interesting topics. Can you spend a moment describing for everyone listening what those terms mean?
Totally. So the hip engine, right? So like you have several engines in your body. You got like a shoulder engine, your spinal engine, hip engine, ankle engine. And like most people, their whole spinal engine is just shut off. Like it doesn't work the right way. And as an athlete, when you're not using your whole engine, you're operating at like 70%, maybe less of your capacity. And that's going to affect your explosive drive, your output. And so the hip engine is like the pelvis, right? Attached to the spine. And if the hip engine isn't like externally rotating or like coiling or doing its behavior when you're running or when you're walking too as well, then it's for people who are not in athletics, it's also going to cause pain. It's going to cause discomfort. And so like your body needs to be free. And when it's shut off and it's not working the right way, discomfort is coming. And so the hip engine, that's that one piece. And that's looking at as well, like how you land to the ground and how you launch from the ground. And so the hip engine is being affected in that, those two movements, landing and launching. And then the shoulder, or sorry, not the, you said the hip engine and then what was the next one?
Spinal engine.
The spinal engine, right? And so the spinal engine needs to be long and free. It doesn't need to be compressed. We're always fighting gravity. And so when our spinal engine is compressed, then we're going to have back pain. We're going to have some things like that, but we're not going to be able to be as free and to be as, you know how water is like really, it's like the Bruce Lee quote. I think it's Bruce Lee, like be like water, be smooth like water. Like when your spinal engine is shut off, you are not smooth. It's just like choppy. And so the spinal engine is one of those things that when I walk, I should see a walk that's kind of like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, when he walks, he has a kind of like, they call it a swag walk, but his chest is starting to rotate from side to side. When I land with my left foot, my chest should coil a little bit. It's about somewhere around like an 11-degree coil into my left foot. And then when I step on my right foot, my spinal engine is going to coil over towards my right foot. And a lot of people, their spinal engine just stays straight the whole time. It doesn't rotate. And so your body is just locked up. And so we need to have full access, the ability to get into some of those end range positions with our hip engine and then also with our spinal engine for freedom. And then also for those that are chasing athletics, they definitely need to use those engines to their max ability.
And this has been a really interesting, just to share a personal anecdote, an interesting evolution for me, where there was a time when I thought of, okay, walking is flexion extension, everything should be straight forward and back. And, to learn that, well, actually, as the hip flexes, there should be a little bit of external rotation. And as the hip extends, there should be some internal rotation. And that's actually how the skeleton moves and how it maximizes range of motion, or as you said, freedom, and how that leads to more efficient movement over time, because it allows for this wonderful recoil and you get some of that, elastic energy, and movement becomes more efficient overall, and the load gets dispersed appropriately throughout all the joints and tissues in a more balanced way, et cetera, et cetera. And, that just in terms of walking, I'm glad you described that, how the spine should rotate there, because that was a big epiphany for me to realize that walking is not just a straight forward and back, sort of like this, sort of like I would think of as like a soldier regimented
military,
something like that, right?
You get it, Garrett. You're right.
So yeah, I think that's one just to really play around. And I still now, when I go on walks, one of my favorite habits is, obviously like many people listening to this have a lot of phone calls and different things. I try to do 1 or 2 calls a day out, with the headset, walking around and feeling that rotation and that freedom. It feels like therapeutic. It feels like rehab. I feel like my back is super loose and everything just feels good walking like that. It almost feels like doing a little bit of Latin dance too, getting the hips going, kind of a mix
Right,
of those things.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I'm grateful you pointed that out. And the thing is like we have moved away from our natural movement. When you look at the way babies crawl, their chest works from side to side. And the movements that we're trying to just instill back into the people we work with is literally just natural movement. We're trying to help them get back to their natural movement so that their body is just not locked up. And so, yeah, the spinal engine is just a big thing. And so we are trying to help people walk better. We're trying to help them run better if they want to run. And so just looking at these areas, we can really just identify whether someone has pain or not. Like, you don't necessarily even have to tell me whether you have pain. I could just watch you walk and I could see what's shut off. I could see what's not working the right way. And so, yeah, that's why I really like the NeuFit model. And especially because your passion is to help people unlock their bodies and to activate it, and to like the muscles that are shut off, the areas that are shut off, you want to activate it so that they then can get back to their natural movement. And so we really have a good alignment. And I think that the more that we can just help others have a toolkit of exercises and more awareness, so that when they're on their own and they're like, you know what, I'm not walking that great, I have now awareness that, I shouldn't necessarily stand like this all the time, because the way our body is, I've listened to some of your podcasts and you've talked about this, is like the stimulus that you feed your body, it starts to affect you. The environment that your body is in, it starts to affect you. And so if I'm standing in this position over and over and over, and if I'm sitting down in a certain way over and over and over, and lifestyle things and the way I walk, it's going to start to corrupt. But if I have good natural behavior and I walk with my spinal engine working the right way, I have full or enough mobility, then I'm not going to have discomfort when I get to 70. I'm going to actually be able to throw with my kids. I'm going to be able to get on the ground and get back up with my grandchildren. And so that's why I love this connection, because you have a heart for caring about these people and helping them get out of pain, because you know that there's a better way. And just providing that information and awareness for these individuals helps them have a toolkit, and they're more equipped. They have better armor to fight the hard things in life with some of the things that are working against our bodies. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful that you brought that up.
Thank you so much for listening to the Undercurrent podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how NeuFit and the newbie can impact your life, please visit our website at www.neu.fit, that's neu.fit, so you can learn more about how it might integrate into your professional practice, how you can use it as a patient, and you can also connect with our team there.
That's beautifully said. And there's a couple points there that you made that I want to elaborate on. One is you talked about how we're always adapting essentially to the input, the environmental cues, the various stimuli that we experience. And you also brought up the notion of moving like babies, and how really that is our goal, moving like we would naturally move, like how indigenous people move, for example, without the quote unquote corrupting influences of, sitting in chairs and sitting in cars hours and hours a day that cause our bodies to get used to different reduced ranges of motion, and our nervous system learns to work in smaller ranges, and then our connective tissues just sort of passively follow and adapt, because our bodies don't want to expend extra energy to keep extra connective tissue alive and functional when it's not being used in those particular ranges, and it doesn't need to be reinforced. So there's a lot there, and really the goal is to get back to the foundation of human movement that we all would have, if not for, assuming everyone, able-bodied, no amputations, et cetera, right? That we all would have if not for those corrupting influences. So it's funny to think about it in that regard, that it takes a lot of work just to get back to our own baselines. And it's also interesting to think about if you compared it to, like, there's some great work I read, for example, in Katie Bowman's book, Move Your DNA. So I think it was something like that. She talks about how there's these studies of indigenous people would get about 30 hours a week of activity. And now we say 3 hours a week of exercise, right? That's like a 10x difference in order of magnitude in the amount of load and challenge and stimulus and input that we get to our tissues. So there is a huge gap in our modern society. So just to kind of highlight and underscore what you're saying there about getting back to the way we should move, I think that's a really good perspective. And let's talk a little bit now about the actual programming and such. So, you obviously, I appreciate the kind words about our work at NeuFit. One of the things that I really like is using analysis software like Gateway to be able to show before and after changes. We see these 5-minute miracles, these wow, aha moments that patients have every day in clinics that are offering NeuFit. And to be able to quantify those, I think, is really valuable. It sort of gamifies it. It helps patients buy in, when you can put a number on things and stuff like that. So I really like anything like that. And then you also make recommendations. You have really good coaching content in there. I've gotten to explore the app too, so I'll mention that. And how do you think generally about in just carrying forward this conversation? If you see a movement deficit, if someone's not moving their spinal engine, if someone is, you find that someone isn't able to fully load their and access their posterior chain, just picking out a couple of things that you've talked about already. What's your approach for, setting aside what clinicians listening to this can do with the newbie to accelerate things in the clinic, setting that aside for a moment, which we can talk about separately, but what's your approach in terms of how are you programming? How much of what type of input does it take to start to see some of these changes? What's your approach then to correcting what you find on the assessment?
Right. Great question. So for us, our goal is to help them get back to the ground, especially if they're a 60-year-old or a 90-year-old. Sometimes they haven't been on the ground and put their knees on the ground or did some stretching there. And so our goal is to help them kind of get in some exercises that are comfortable and get to end range in a healthy way and move through end range and back, end range and back. And so some of the exercises that we're giving them, they might not have seen before, but essentially they're like what the indigenous would do, or they're exercises that just kind of help free up the hip and improve like their launching behavior, which is what you were doing. And so some of those exercises take place on the ground. Some of them are standing on their feet. And so the exercises are they're really simple because we have videos. You just follow along and do them, and you can do them from your home. The program for people is based on what they choose. For example, if you say you only have 5 minutes to commit to your exercises, then your whole program is based on these are the perfect exercises for you to do for 5 minutes. If you have 30 minutes or more and you're an athlete and you need that more time, your program gets tailored towards that. And so our approach is to give you the best exercises for your toolkit for you to do on your own. And you get those routines and get some optional routines too as well if you want to do more. But you essentially just master the foundation first, and then you build upon that as you get more experienced. And we reassess every month. So you mentioned just the ability to assess after the NeuFit and see the changes just from putting the NeuFit on, the newbie on, and then assessing, okay, my hips are in better alignment now, or, my posterior chain has more access, more mobility. And so we are constantly just assessing. You could assess every day if you wanted, but we encourage everyone to assess once a month. And then the program will change. The exercises will change based on the way your body is changing. And so, is there anything else on that that I don't know if I missed anything on that? I was trying to cover the part about the newbie and putting in the assessment with the newbie and then seeing the changes, and then also how our program is kind of run, our goals with the assessment, with the training and all.
Yeah, I think that is great. And I'm curious, I alluded to this earlier, but the, G8way, Gateway is the name of the business. And I believe that's because you're looking at, call it 8 different areas or categories. You can elaborate on that. And also in this example where you say someone has only 5 minutes, let's say they have issues in all 8 of those areas. So we'll ask you what, just tell us exactly what the 8 is. And then how, in that case, if someone has 5 minutes or 10 minutes, would you prioritize what they're going to do first? Because if you don't have time to work on all of them, right, you got to prioritize what's going to be sort of the first domino, get the most bang for the buck in that type of scenario.
Right. Well, within 5 minutes, if I am at risk for back chain dominance, it's one of the points. If my posterior chain is weak or misaligned, that type of thing, then my program is going to be tailored towards that primarily. And then also just getting a stronger foundation with our feet. And so if my feet, that inner malleolus is collapsed and I'm starting to have flat feet, then we'll attack those areas first, because we've seen that when we have a stronger posterior chain and our feet, the thing that connects us to the ground first, when the feet are well and the spinal engine, which is so powerful to the way we move and do everything, when those two pieces are great, then a lot of things clean up with themselves. And so those are the 2 areas that we would tackle first. If you only have 5 minutes and you were risk all the way through for those 8 categories, which we've seen it, and you might feel right now listening to this that you might be that. And if you only have 5 minutes, you're probably going to have a program that's tailored towards improving back chain dominance, and then also improving inside ankle bone high is what we call it, or just like a stronger Achilles, a better shape with your foot. So we're kind of building that arch dome structure of the foot to be a little bit more inflated and strong. That way, as you move throughout the day, you're having good feet, you're having good back chain dominance, posterior chain dominance, and then that kind of cleans up itself in all the other areas. So the 8 points, let's see if I can do this on the spot, is going to be back chain dominance. So that's the first one. The next one is inside ankle bone high. All right, just having a strong
more of a supinated foot, we could say.
Yeah. And like there's a time and place for everything. But what happens is if I'm just constantly having a flat foot, then it's going to limit a lot of things. So back chain dominance, inside ankle bone high. The next one is columns, is what we call it, which is like your foundation. So if I have like shoulder misalignment or hips out of alignment, that's going to affect everything. And so columns is another one, which is like your foundation.
Just back to the inside ankle bone high or supinated foot. There's a really interesting physiology in the foot, which you, Jacob, know, and I just want to share to highlight that. And it is that the arch of the foot is essentially like a spring, a passive recoil type of mechanism. And so the more supinated it is, as it pronates through that certain phase of gait, there's more room. It's like loading a bow and arrow. You're drawing it back further, or you're loading that spring more. Whereas if it's already starting flat, you don't have as much room to load it, and therefore you don't get as much energy back too. So, starting with that is valuable, and that's just one of the reasons why. But just to elaborate on that a little bit.
And one thing too, Garrett, is valgus with the knee and the legs. When we're in a valgus shape, that foot has really collapsed. The inner ankle bone is really driving towards the ground. And so when we have a valgus shape, or if you look at a non-contact, non-contact catastrophic injury with the ACL or a knee, when those joints are blown up, It's because that foot collapsed. Like the foot is in a compromising position with a non-contact injury with the knee. And so the foot is so important. And so making sure that that structure is a strong structure when it strikes the ground is really key. And a lot of people have to work on that. Most people, especially the ones who have like deviated from their natural movement patterns and their growth plates have already closed, those people really have to make sure that they have strong feet and the shape of the foot is really healthy.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, there's a time and place for everything. So when
Right.
you go into hip extension,
Mm-hmm.
terminal push off type of phase of gait, you would want to see a little bit of internal rotation and that there. So you're not saying never do it, but
Right.
I
Right. And we have videos in our app that will tell you about that. Like when I'm saying, I don't know, I know that listeners right here wouldn't be able to see what I'm doing, but like let me just like explain this for you and anyone who's watching. So like when we're talking about back chain dominance, structurally, more often than not, we want to have the hips, the greater trochanter joint, to be stacked above the outer malleolus, like you said, the ankle. And so when it's leaked forward, not good when it's primarily your life like that. But there's a time and place, like you said, for your hips to thrust forward, like to like go out of alignment. And I'm putting up quotes right now if you can't see. So like for example, if I was like dodging a dodgeball, maybe I have to go like this to dodge the dodgeball, but my hips are thrusting forward and my back is going back.
and he's leaning back. If you're just listening, he's leaning back like Neo in the
Yeah.
Matrix dodging bullets. It's pretty
Correct.
impressive actually.
Correct. Exactly. And so like there's a time and place where my hips need to thrust forward, like how you were saying. And like that right there is not how I want to live my life. I don't want to live my life like this. And a lot of people, they have like this banana body and they walk around like this. And I'm exaggerating it, but there's a time and place when it's necessary. And so we're not saying like, hey, Garrett, don't ever go into the front chain like don't go into a front chain dominant behavior. That's the opposite of what we call back chain dominance. We're not saying don't ever go into the front chain dominant behavior. We're not saying don't ever collapse your foot. Like there's a time and place where like your foot can collapse. But the thing is if you, Garrett, have your feet 24/7 collapsed, then that's going to be a problem. And so that's what our assessment will assess. It'll assess with your running behavior, like, are my feet collapsed all the time? Because there is a time and place where you need to have a strong inside ankle bone high shape.
Okay, so we can go back to our 8 here. So you already said back chain dominance, the foot position that we just talked about, and then columns, having the legs aligned directly underneath you, not being off balance. You mentioned, I don't know if you got to elaborate on those yet. I sort of cut you off to go back to the second one.
No, it's okay. And that's good. Stop me at any point. So this is also looking at shoulder alignment horizontally. It's telling, which with that, I've highlighted on this with this podcast already. Like that's going to tell us if we're like a one side dominated human. If like our spinal erectors on one side of our body are stronger than the other side. And so columns is just looking at your foundation. Imagine pillars in a house. If one of them is crooked, then as you move up the house, it's going to start to have like some misalignment. And so this is a lot of byproducts of Peter Goskew's work and essentially just looking at, in my standing posture, are my knees already in a valgus state? Are my hips aligned? Are my shoulders aligned? What is my center of mass? If my center of mass is like bearing primarily 90% of my weight on my right side, on my right foot, we're assessing that right there with the columns category. And like if your body's compensating and you're walking and you're running, like you're definitely going to have pain on the other side. And so, and even on the side that you're compensating on. And so the columns is just literally assessing your center of mass and your foundation, your alignment horizontally and then vertically. And also it's doing that in standing behavior, in squatting behavior, and also when you run and walk.
Okay. So we've got columns, and then we're going through it. See, we're testing you to see if we can go through all 8 here.
I know my team members and all my people at G8way Max will be upset if I can't do this. So I got it. The next one is suppleness. All right. And that's like a fancy word of like how we would describe mobility, access, like the ability to get into a deep squat or the ability to get into that forward bend that you were talking about. And so it's, do I have full suppleness within my back chain? Do I have full suppleness within the areas of my, like my engines, my shoulder engine, my spinal engine, my hip engine? And so it's essentially looking at how flexible am I? Are my hips locked up? That type of thing.
Okay.
All right. Next one is going to be landing. So it's looking at how well you land to the ground. What is your femur bones doing when they land to the ground? Are your legs externally rotating, or are they stuck in another position? And so landing is a big one to assess whether you have knee pain. So if you take your assessment and your landing score is at risk, let's think about all the times that you land to the ground in movements. You step off the curb, you land to the ground. You walk and you land to the ground. And so just landing is a big one to focus on. And going back to the suppleness, if you don't have access within your body to be able to land well, then both those categories are probably going to be risk for you.
Okay, that makes sense. And I know that's why one of the things in your programming was recommendations to sit on the ground during the day and things like, in terms of the suppleness piece, right? To just get the hips used to spending time in some of these different positions that our ancestors saw before we had couches and chairs.
Right. Just like a better way to rest. And we know that some people can't sit on the ground. And so that's why we have designed our system to where it adapts to you. If I can't sit on the ground, we want you to get there eventually, but your exercises will be tailored to where you don't even have to sit on the ground. And so we take a really one size fits all approach. That's what I was saying as me as a triplet. Like I really needed a personalized routine. And so we want you to sit on the ground, and we do exercises on the ground. But if you're not able to get on the ground because your knees are hurting and you have some pre-existing conditions, then we'll tailor that program towards you.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, all right. So we did suppleness and then landing. Mm-hmm. So that was the fifth one.
That was the fifth one. Right. Okay. So then we got feet alignment, which is looking at just the relationship between the feet, the Achilles all the way up to the calves, the shins. And so a lot of the time, like if you're in a valgus state or you got shin splints, we're looking at what is the relationship with your movements with the feet, what's going on there. And so we want to assess with feet alignment. There's a time and place where you can run and have that foot splay out significantly, like externally. Like there's a time and place where you can land with the duck foot is kind of what we would call it. But really what you see is some of the strongest athletes, like on the football field, they run and they land with like a straight and strong foot, first or second toe straight. And so when we don't have the ability to land with a strong and straight foot, and we never, ever land with a strong and straight foot, then that's when we have some issues. And you make a cut. If you're running straight and you make a cut to your left, like a 90-degree cut, and you have an externally like duck foot shape with that foot, you're going to have a significantly higher chance to tear your ACL. And so feet alignment is a big one. And we tend to see that people who have ankle pain or knee pain, their feet alignment is a caution or a risk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. So that was number 6, I believe.
Okay. And then the next one is going to be shoulders. And so shoulders is assessing whether you're in a scapular winging position, like whether your scaps are starting to round forward. And it's also assessing whether your neck alignment is in a good position. So like your head weighs 12 to 15 pounds for some people, and that weighs a lot. And so like if your head is like significantly pushed forward, you got that tech neck that people call it, just being on your computer. Yeah, yeah, if you see it. Yeah, I wish the listeners could see the way you did that. So it's a thing we're assessing for shoulders, and if the neck is in poor alignment, it affects the shoulders. You might be really trap dominant. And so that's one point. And then we're also just assessing the horizontal alignment again with the columns and just seeing whether it's in a good position.
Okay. So 7 out of 8 so far. Can he do it?
Right.
Can he?
I would not forget this one because I know this is the one that you love the most, the launching one, just because I know that this is the one that you needed to work on the most. And
Yep.
you told me that your hip internal rotation was an area that you've known for a long time, that you just needed more access, more mobility, more freedom. And when we looked at the way you launched from the ground, the launching category, we saw that your entire leg was launching when you were running and walking in the opposite direction, that it should have been like spiraling. And so the launching category is assessing how well you launched from the ground.
And so just to elaborate on what it looked like for me, I think it's a remnant of my ice skating days where it sort of looked like I was pushing out a little bit instead of really extending my hip, which has an element of internal rotation to reach that full extension. It was sort of going out into a little bit of external rotation there, which could be, some people might do that to compensate because of a deficit in ankle dorsiflexion, for example, or something like that, right? But my hip I was sort of like pushing back and out, as opposed to extending with that internal rotation combo. Is that a fair description?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you got it. And that puts a lot of stress on the hip flexor, like the connective tissue all on the front side of your body, your groins get significantly impacted when you don't launch the right way. And so the launching category is also looking at like full access within the hamstrings and the lower extremities there. But when we're looking at the video assessment, it's assessing whether you were able to get into like a strong internal rotation shape when you launched from the ground. It's looking at what was the femur bone doing, what was the like when you launched from the ground, what was the heel doing? So like the heel, like where your shoe is, like was it spiraling out and away towards your body, like away from your body, or was your heel shooting up and in towards your body? When you said external rotation, when you were getting into that step of launching from the ground, your heel would have been shooting up and into your body because that whole leg above the heel was externally rotating. And so for you, you wanted the opposite shape. You wanted that heel to spiral up and away from the body. You wanted the kneecap to start to internally rotate. It's not the kneecap itself internally rotating, but that's just a landmark that we're looking at. And we want to see that whole leg spiraling inward in internal rotation. So yes. Yeah, that's all 8 right there.
All right. He did it. So, so we've gotten through the analysis, what you're looking at earlier on in the conversation, and then even in greater depth there with the 8 categories or 8 real specific areas. Talked a little bit about program design. Can we zoom out a little bit now and talk about who's using the system? We met, actually, I mentioned a mutual friend had introduced us. We met at a baseball tournament where there's teams coming in from all over, the South and maybe even other regions too, big here in the Austin area. You guys came down for that. And so that's when I got to try it out. And you were running, youth baseball athletes through that assessment. during that weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Who's using it so far? Who are the best candidates to use it? Of course, I'm interested
Mm-hmm.
in this for the physical therapy, chiropractic, athletic trainers who are listening to this here too, using it as part of their assessment, and clinics like ours too. So, but just tell us a little bit about where some of these kind of sweet spots are for technology like Gateway.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you got two legs and you're breathing, two arms, this is for you. And we have worked with pediatricians, so all the way down to the little kids, helping just like physical assistance of the pediatric world, doctors that are involved in clinics there, educating their families on like your kids should probably not be resting in this position because as they grow up, they're going to start to be prone to knee pain. So at the very low level of these young infants, we're working with them all the way up to the 99-year-old. We had a individual who was 87 and she joined our system at like 6 in the morning. I'm a technology guy, so I see like, okay, this person joined. And she was able to complete everything, get the assessment, get the training program in 10 minutes. And so that's like from step one, like, all right, let me fill out this form. Let me download the app. And so that was really fast. And we haven't even gotten into like how fast the report and assessment goes, but she was 87 and it goes all the way up to that because there's grandparents that we've worked with and they are on the exact verge. I can't stress this enough, like 1-2 weeks out from having like a total knee replacement, from like needing to have surgery, and they have bone on bone contact. Like there's no cartilage in their joints. And they're still able, if they buy in and do the work, they're still able to get that freedom and then avoid the surgery. And I know there's a lot of listeners out there, not to say that surgery is not the answer, right? There's a time and place for everything. But like for some people, there could be a better way, and surgery for some people could be the last option. And
Yeah,
so
definitely be a last resort.
yeah, yeah. And so 90 years old, 99 years old, if you are looking to get out of pain, if you're just trying to move better, if you feel like when you sleep, you wake up and you got a poor neck, tough shoulder, like even your sleeping mechanics, we'll talk about. And so it's for everyone. It's for the kid that's trying to grow well, that doesn't want to have messed up growth patterns, that wants to make sure that they develop well. And it's all the way to the person who's trying to end their life well and leave their family with the best of them, not like the rest of them with some body aches and body pains. And they're trying to leave their kids and their grandkids with the best version of themselves. So it's the whole spectrum. And one thing too, while you brought this up, just to tackle this, is when your growth plates, which average male growth plates close like 15 to 17, average female growth plates close like 13 to 15, and I might be a little off on the ages, but if your growth plates have closed, it's even harder to get back to your natural movement and you need it more. If you're deviating from age 17, you need it now. Tomorrow is worse. Like your body is naturally is as you get older is is fighting more things. It's fighting the stimuli that we talked about. It's it's fighting the environment. And so if you're 90 years old, you needed it. You needed this already. And if you're 14 and your growth plates are about to close, you need to get this down right so that when your growth plates close, you won't lose this. Your movement will be great as you get into your 20s and your 30s because you did the right necessary exercises and natural movement that you needed as a young kid.
It's like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today.
Amen.
It's so.
Wise, very
What
wise.
about practice owners? So you mentioned like this woman logged on and did it from home.
Mhm.
Are practice owners or clinicians using it in their clinics with their patients? What's the use case there in that scenario?
Right. Yes. So we have people from all over the country and then also outside the country too as well that are in clinics or organizations, like for example a baseball organization, and they're running their kids through the assessment and the training program. And so with organizations and clinics, what's really unique about what we have is the person like yourself, Garrett, you would be able to see all of the training if it's, the client is okay with it. Obviously, if it's your organization, they're okay with it because, they're joining NeuFit or they're joining this baseball organization. And so they're able to see what we're programming. If it's, acceptable with the client, they're able to see, the organization is able to see their report. So it's kind of like a team effort. And so this is in clinics, this is in, I mentioned pediatric clinics, and so it's all the way down to the young kids. It's in um, like recovery units to help people that have had a stroke and they got to get back to walking better. And so it's also in the athletic world. I specialized in athletic endeavors, and I was a baseball player, and so there's universities that have this where we've assessed their entire athletic department and we've been like, you know what, your football team, they're going to be at risk, and your baseball team is moving a lot better than last year. And so we're kind of all over, and then we do work with the individual as well. And so it's kind of I've heard it said well, is like, if you're a human, this is for you. You all got to move, and it's best to move well.
And a physical therapy clinic or a chiropractic practice would be
Hmm.
one of these organizations that you described would sort of fit under there too.
Huge, huge, yeah. For example, so a chiropractic place. When I was talking about the hips being out of alignment, like your, we've had this happen with a lot of groups where the chiropractor will have the individual take the assessment before they show up so that they can see, okay, that those hips are out of alignment, and see to the degree that they're out of alignment, and be able to have an idea on the patient before they show up. Okay, we got to work on this. Okay, there's some issues right here, some imbalances. Well, let me correct this. And so, yes, we're definitely doing well there.
That's awesome. And I want to transition to as we wind down here, a couple rapid fire questions.
Okay,
Do you have a
shoot.
favorite? And if you can't narrow it down to one, you can do a top two or three. But favorite book or concept that has shaped
Mm,
your thinking over the years?
man, that's a tough one. Well, um, I would be lying if I didn't say the Bible. And I know that's like a throw weird question or answer for some people, but it's really shaped my life, who I am, my character, my identity. Um, Beyond that, let's say I have. Hmm, I'm more of an audiobook guy. So let's see. I could say your book. And no, I really enjoyed your book. My whole family's read it. I know that that's kind of I need to have something other than that. You might have to come back to me. That is one to throw on the spot for sure. I'll have to think about that.
All right, all right. What about? Is there any one belief or piece of conventional wisdom about movement or
Um,
performance that most people get wrong?
right. Man, you have had really good questions, Garrett, on this podcast. You sure have. So Wow, there's a lot of things that I could say right here. So one of them is, and I hope I don't have people that attack me. So I think I could give you two. So one is that maxing, like throwing 600 pounds on a barbell, right? I know there's a time and place. Um, I'm a believer that movement over maxes. There's a huge strength coach at TCU called Zach DeChant. That's his name. I probably pronounced it wrong. And he's a big believer in movement over maxes. And so I want these individuals to be strong. But if they can't move well, then they need to work on moving better. And sometimes throwing like 900 pounds on your back might not be the best thing. If you look at sometimes the way bodybuilders run, you ask a bodybuilder to sprint, like it looks kind of rough. And so I say that with a lot of peace, and everything is like, I'm not coming at people by any means. That's not how I do anything. And we definitely come alongside people who are throwing in like a lot of weight on a barbell. And I'm talking a lot of weight, not a little weight. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if you're supplementing the right exercises in, the right corrective exercises, making sure that you move well, and then you're doing the heavy weight, okay, you'll be all right. But if you're just doing heavy weight, a lot of people are like, I got to get stronger. I got to get stronger. And in their mind, I know, and they say it, that I got to be able to get up to 500 pounds on a barbell. And that's cool. That really is cool. But like if you were just at 490 and you got back pain or hip pain, maybe the answer is to try something else as well. Like start working on the way you launch from the ground and doing those exercises coupled with what you're doing to make sure that you're staying all right. So that's,
One,
yeah, go
one
ahead.
of one of one of my favorite questions is to ask if you could put a billboard out
Mm,
somewhere or have one message you could shout from the rooftops. What would it be that would fit in the number of characters you could put on a billboard? And I think movement over maxes
right.
is would that be your statement? Because I think that's actually a really good one there too.
Hmm. It
Yes.
is. It is. And that's there might be some controversy on that one, but that's what I believe. And at least I've just seen people who have been a byproduct of lift a lot, and there's a time and place, and it's good. There's sure. Like I'm not bashing any of it, but just after you get done with your sport, I've just worked with a lot of people who are in their 40s and 50s, and they're like, you know, I got really ripped up and I'm paying the consequence for it now versus, after I'm done with my sport, I feel great. I'm in shape. I can do whatever I want and I'm not limited by the discomfort.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that would be on a billboard. And then another one that I would throw on a billboard is probably just, it's not controversy. It's just pain is limiting. It is limiting. Pain is limiting. Discomfort is limiting. And just like think about it. Imagine your life without those limits. Maybe you're like happier, like with your kids, like you don't wake up with back pain and you're not angry, with your family a little bit more just because you don't have back pain. And so I know that hits your heart well because you care about the people that you're with, and like your newbie unit works, your philosophy works, the system works. And so like just being able to free up their neurological behavior, their movement with you, like it doesn't just unlock their body, and it unlocks their mind. Like they're just way more peaceful when they don't have these limits. So yeah, I would put on a billboard, pain is limiting. Just imagine your life without it.
Yes, that's a beautiful note on which to end it here. So, if
Hmm.
anyone is interested in learning more about Gateway Max, Jacob, what's the best website and or social media platform to look you guys up?
Right, right. Well, social media, wish we were on it. We probably should be on it, especially as a technology guy. I know the benefits. And so one day we'll probably be on it again. We've just been reaching the people through guys like you, and then also on gatewaymax.com, which is, as you you said it's spelled G8way Max.com, gatewaymax.com.
Awesome. And if this resonated with you, it's at least worth a trip to that website. And is there a special offer for NeuFit listeners? Anything
I
we
would
can
love
pass
it.
along?
Yeah. Let's just do code NeuFit. And you got to spell that right, NEUFIT. And if you put that on any of your plans, let's go a 15% discount.
Awesome.
NeuFit,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
He just did that on the spot for us. I appreciate that very much. So thank you, Jacob, for being here. I've enjoyed your content. I enjoyed the experience. One thing I didn't even mention. So when you mentioned you picked up that issue in my launch movement pattern with the anti-spiral instead of the proper spiraling pattern in my leg, the fact that it was personalized to me had a really interesting effect of motivating me to follow the recommendations, do the program, and be more diligent. Where, if something is a little more one size fits all or doesn't really land in that same way, doesn't really resonate as much, I don't think people will be as motivated. So it was an interesting psychological observation too. But I've had a very positive experience. So glad we got to have you on to share your work, and appreciate you, Jacob, and you tuning into this. Thank you so much for being part of NeuFit Nation. We'll see you on the next episode of the Undercurrent podcast.